Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think firstly I have to say when Mumbrella invited me to come and speak about creativity, I just felt really compelled to focus on how data has impacted and will impact creativity from here on, as you will see later with a lot of pieces of work in the following presentation. And why I really want to touch on this is because if I just Googled does data kills creativity? And right in the first page of Google, there's like loads, and very recent in 2016, huge debate about how data is possibly killing creativity. It scares the shit out of creatives, especially when people are even saying that AIs are probably better at doing our job for us, okay? So, not surprising, this is going on and it's really crippling a lot of creatives in the industry, but not just our industry. It's actually also, threatening the movie makers. So we're not the only ones. And this is something that I actually found from research, recent TEDx session done by this professor. And he was talking about how data has impacted creativity, but in a good way. Because as you can see in today's film, like the likes of Netflix and HBOs are winning the game. And they are actually threatening a lot of the traditional movie-making houses purely because they were tapping on the data that they have. So I did a quick edit of a short snippet from his presentation.
The problems for our friends in the entertainment industry is that technology has shifted the source of power in their industry and reduced the value of many of their existing properties. For the last 100 years, the source of power in the entertainment industry has been the ability to control how content was created and distributed. The problem today is neither of those scarce resources are as scarce as they once were. The scarce resource today is audience attention. And the new source of power in the business is the ability to control the data necessary to manage that attention, and also control over the platform necessary to collect that data.
So I think the one key thing that really struck from his presentation that really resonates with me was all they were doing was the same thing that we're trying to do. It's to get people's attention. Because with the slew of advertising content, whether it's advertising or even movie and entertainment, now everyone is competing for that attention of everyone else. So we need to stop thinking like we're just the only advertising content. We are competing for every kind of attention. So this is the effect of what's happening to us in reference to brands, right? We are like that girl there who keeps talking and talking and talking, but we're not getting that person's attention. So I think there's a role for data to play, just like we could learn from Netflix and the likes of HBO. How do we make content and our communication a lot more relevant so that he is going to listen to you, all right? So with that said, I always like to make sure to actually encourage people to look at their own selves on a daily basis. This is an example of what you would do when you're going to go on a first date with someone. You're quite likely tapping on data already, trying to learn something about the date that you're going to meet. So that's the beginning of even using data to actually learn more about the person that you're going to speak to. So I always tell my creatives in the office, data is not something to be afraid of. Data is something that you have been using, and I think it's not that foreign after all. So with that said, I thought I use this analogy to help very easily simplify and make data less daunting. At the end of the day, communication is about trying to woo that customer. So let's look at how we can actually use data to actually woo our customers in the right way. And it's very simple, 5 tips, all right? The first one, the art of pursuit, right? If you think about your customers like the girl that you're after, you will be going to her Facebook page, you'll be observing what she likes, you'll be trying to assess who the kind of things that she's interested in, so that you can have a more relevant conversation with her. But more interestingly is, do you say the same thing to her in morning, in noon, at night, when you go for a movie or when you go out for breakfast? You don't. So I think the next example the footage that I want to show you is a methodology that is currently present in the likes of Facebook and even in Google, where they use data to actually create not just one message, but a slew of messages so that you can actually rightfully target the person in the most relevant manner. Sound?
Or around the content they watch. But what if instead we could target their moments, like the time their team wins the big game, or when they find themselves up late with their baby? So we used data to build an approach that could do just that. One that would allow brands to program content around people's meaningful moments. Introducing Moments OS. The process starts by identifying the occasions that are relevant to people, the brand, and the category or consumption periods. We then leverage proprietary Facebook data, third-party data partners, and the client's data to build these moments and turn them over for creative development. For instance, for Kleenex, we identified the moment when people became new pet owners and delivered them the story of a dog named Chance and his equally abled owner, becoming the 8th most viral film of the year. We built and delivered 22 stories in all of highly relevant content delivered to their audience at precisely the right moment in time, resulting in over 110 million views and a market share gain of over 2 points. For Progressive, the brand wanted to convince an audience coming of age to consider some equally grown-up insurance. We identified and targeted a series of moments relevant to that period when you're becoming a new adult. Just building creative for these 16 moments created over 20 trillion, yes, trillion, different combinations of content being delivered to our audience at precisely the most relevant moments in time. And this is just the beginning of moment-based marketing. Now, the next time a creative brief asks for a new moms campaign, you'll be able to engage her when she's commuting to work, as well as when she's thinking about dinner at 4 p.m. or judging a prestigious award show. Moments OS. Thanks for watching.
So whenever I show this video to whether it's my clients or even my creative team or people in my office, they all ask me the question, why are we not doing this yet? Okay. I have to say it really is, in order to do something like that, we really need to assess the way we actually think creatively today and for the last 150 years. And this is just a very quick snapshot, right? I think today still, many brands think this way, many creative teams think this way. We look for one insight, we look for one, and that one insight became one idea, and that one idea became one message and one key visual, which many brands still do. And eventually that one message, one key visual becomes plastered all over these media channels. It worked this way because, in the past, things couldn't change fast enough, right? You can't keep changing your OOH every single 5 seconds. But with today's media platform, then why are we still using a 150-year-old method? Do we really need to reassess, these parts? Maybe one insight, one idea still matters, but does it mean that it always has to be one message? Does it have to be one visual? And the other thing that I want to highlight here is, we're all here to reanalyze the creative process. And the creative process means both clients and agency. It takes 2 hands to clap. So throughout my presentation, you will see where I put a balance on the roles they play. In this case, both sides have to embrace a new way of thinking. On other instances, later you'll see, maybe the agency needs to play a bigger role. So with that said, that's something to consider, and you can ask me questions later at the end of the day. But let's go to tip 2, right? So after you've learned something about her, after you've said the right things, after you've made a good impression, how do you continue to make a bigger impression? How do you use data so that it's not just very dry content? It's something that we've seen before, but I'm beginning to see a lot of brands using it in a very bold and extremely fun way. And this is the next example I want to share with you of how a brand like Nike has taken data and really put itself out there.
running is in Nike's DNA. It's at the heart of the brand, so we wanted to create an experience to challenge the concept of the run itself.
超正確な RFID システムを用いて1周目のラップタイムを測ります。2周目より LED スクリーンにアバターが出現。アバターは1周目のラップタイムで並走し、アバターに勝つと新しく更新されたベストタイムでアバターが走り、自分の最高記録をさらに超えられるよう自分に挑戦することができます。
It mimics competition because you're not just beating a light or your watch, you're beating almost like an actual person.
Pacer からナショナルレコード、ナイキのエリートアスリートたちの記録をもとにアバターのライブラリを構築し、コーチたちは8つの基礎トレーニングに合わせてモードを選択することができます。
Matututo yung runner ng tamang pace. Here, it's not the usual track oval. Medyo hirap na yung uphill.
We knew we were building something very magical, but you know, when it first kind of turned on and started working, we were all like, oh my god.
An athlete's greatest competition is always themselves. Our ambition was to bring our athletes face to face with themselves.
So what's interesting about this case, and I really love to always showcase this is something done in the middle of Manila. This is Philippines. This is not United States. So something like that is possible in this part of the world if we really have to reassess the creative process again. This is probably a majority of what most brands would spend. A lot on TV, some on print, out of home, and then that little bit on digital. But if you look at the example with Nike, what is digital today? Digital happens everywhere. Data happens everywhere. Now, who and what budget would you use that? How would you compartmentalize your budget so that you could make something like that happen? I think, again, with all these, I don't have the solid answers. I think everyone's experimenting and finding their own ways, but I guess we need to start somewhere, right? In this case, the client did. So the next example is the next tip that I really want to bring up, and it's actually a very interesting one, is there are times where you need to give up. So there are times when the data is telling you, don't even bother with these people. But are we listening to the data? This is an interesting example because I don't think this is what many people know, that the likes of Facebook, and I believe maybe even Google, is able to do for some of their clients. So this is a study that Facebook can do for some of their big spenders, obviously, to help them really optimize their campaigns from one to another. This study they call it a T-test. It's conducted by the marketing science department in Facebook, where for the likes of, say, a client like Uber, they would look at their past campaigns and look at what their objectives were. And what they do is they assess the difference between two audiences. Primarily, one is the people who converted with them, and one is the people who didn't convert with them. So in the case of, say, Uber, the last campaign was they wanted mobile app download installers. So they pulled out the data from the past campaign or even 3 campaigns and analyzed the profile of these people, who were the makeup of the converters versus who were the makeup of their non-converters. And what's interesting is we actually sat down, at the time when I was there, we sat down and looked at all the values in terms of, basically from interest to the kind of content that they were after, the demographics, their lifestyle. We were taking all these data out to act, and every time when I do this exercise on the client, on the brands, we always see a very big stark difference. Say, for instance, in this case for Uber, a lot of the converters were bargain hunters. On the other hand, the non-converters were basically older women or older men who were looking for luxury yachts and were browsing high-end jewelry. And so, but yet, if we don't delve into who are the ones we are not catching, we'll continue to cast that net out blindly to grab people that were not even interested in you. So this was an example of what we actually did for Uber, where from then, we took that value that we know, and from then on, what they did was the next campaign, they refined and retargeted and focused their efforts on people who looked like the converters over there with the same creative. And then they created separate and completely different creatives for to go after the non-converters. And in this case, they would be selling their premium services instead. So this is a very interesting exercise, because until when I had joined Facebook, I didn't know that this was possible and this was something that we should be doing all the time. I think so the other exercise that we did, just to give you an example of what the kind of values and kind of insights that we draw out from the t-test. So this is another example that was done for Shiseido. Shiseido said, I want to go after the converters in our last campaign, because the campaign was working well, but how can we continue to refine the creatives there? So we pulled out all the data, and clearly, it's not, if you look at the broad categories, it's not surprising that the woman would be into beauty, fashion, shopping, food, and blah, blah, blah. But what's more interesting is when you deep dive into the minute details of what the data is telling you. In terms of beauty, the Shiseido woman is someone who cares more about dermatological care. Okay? In terms of, this is for Japan, the statistics. So in terms of entertainment, she's actually a gaming fan. Okay? So these were the values that eventually were shared with Shiseido so that they could actually use these insights and to build the next wave of campaign, the next wave of creatives for that campaign. But I mean, what this basically says and sort of gives you a sort of a peek into how can you actually, again, relook at the creative process. I mean, every time, I receive briefs every month, right? Every other month, and it's from the same client. 3 months later, after you give me a brief, we create ideas, we launch, we report. 3 months later, you give me the same brief again, and the same insight again, and then I'm supposed to come up with a different creative. But do we want to carry on doing that, or are we learning more from and building from the past campaigns that we've run, all right? And what's actually quite disturbing is this apparently, until I've been exposed to the world of media and Facebook, that in every campaign, if you were lucky, you would get about a single-digit conversion. So what happened to your 90% of non-converters? And how much media money is spent in that sense if you don't actually investigate why you're not converting? So I think this is something, again, I bring back to the agency and I try to instill. It's a very different way of thinking because it's really not the usual process, all right? But who's to say that we can't change things now that we know and we have this amount of data in our hands, all right? So on the fourth point, when we think about data, we tend to feel it feels quite daunting, right? Especially for creative agencies and even for clients. Everyone's coming to you and say, let's do something with data. And then you're so afraid, and then you have your own data, it's all messed up already, and then you have Google, and then you have Facebook, and you have the likes of IBM, Watsons, and everyone coming to you and say, let's do something with data. But don't be afraid, just partner them. Because the next example you will see, this is what the result is when a real great partnership comes together and it creates a really interesting creative idea.
There's a new Pope in town, His Holiness Pius XIII. And he has his own series on Canal+, The Young Pope. Different, unconventional, iconoclast. He decided to show the world how modern he is, not by shouting it from the balcony of the Vatican, but rather on social networks, by addressing in particular the millions of sinners to be found there, and by replying to each of their posts in real time, with witty answers and quoting only the Bible.
Steven, just shut up and go fuck yourself.
Love each other in the same way that I have loved you. John 15:12. Trump just called Clinton a nasty woman. Bitch seems more appropriate.
Avoid all perverse talk. Stay away from corrupt speech. Proverbs 4:24.
But since this man is not a god, just a pope, and since he has to answer millions of people, we gave him a digital aid in the form of an artificial intelligence, shaped in his image, powered by IBM Watson, and baptized Amen. It knows the 39,000 verses of the Bible as well as he does, thinks like him, and is as compassionate and humorous as he is.
Freshly arrived pizza, time to feast.
But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Luke 14:13.
Flagrant foul on Ronaldo. Is the referee fucking blind?
Be silent, and I will teach you wisdom. John 33:33.
Just run 10 kilometers in 50 minutes. Who's the best, losers?
Do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance. Samuel 2:3.
Practical when you're dealing with millions of people. 1 million replies generated by our artificial intelligence. 4 million people reached. The best launch for a series in France. Not bad, right?
Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Ecclesiastes 12:8.
So as you can see, if the team didn't actually meet up with the guys at IBM Watson's and explore what was possible, this was done about almost a year or two ago, right? It's not something new. But again, it's about sitting together and explore the possibilities. And if I think about the creative process today, and I myself run quite a few teams, I have to say, every time they come back to me, it's always the same old creative process that does not involve anyone else except for the people inside the agency. Despite the fact that, within Havas, for instance, we have Universal Music, we have Game Loft, none of them will show up in the first round of creative ideas. But it's just human behavior. It's just, we're so used to our process for 150 years. It's so hard to break out of that behavior. But I think as clients or as agency leads, or it is in us to basically remind our teams every day to keep exploring what's out there and how you actually can collaborate better for more surprising ideas like that. And the last tip that I want to leave with everyone else is, at the end of the day, I think we have to remember today's successful brands are all brands that deliver value. A lot of times, yes, you do see examples of that, for instance, using data, creating a buzz, making it fun, but can data be worked harder? And we've seen that in direct response, in how many brands actually drive more tactical campaigns. But the next example I'll show you is how sneakers took data and actually drove it right down to point of sale.
Snickers launched an advertising campaign in Australia in partnership with 7-Eleven that changes the price of the candy bar based on the
mood of the internet. And when anger goes up, Snickers prices go down. Australia, get angry. Let's get those things down to 20 cents.
Introducing the Hungerithm, a hunger algorithm that linked price to people's real-time moods. As anger went up, prices went down at every 7-Eleven in Australia. Built on a 3,000-word lexicon from MIT, the Hungerithm analyzed over 14,000 social posts a day to determine sentiment. It even understood sarcasm and slang, and not just any slang, Aussie slang. Prices updated 144 times a day, and users simply clicked Get a Snickers on the Hungerithm mobile site to get a 7-Eleven barcode. No downloading apps or printing required. That would have just made them angrier. As prices dropped, fans were alerted via reactive social content, live in-store displays, and more.
Prices fluctuated wildly today, thanks largely
Visit snickers.com.au. Each new price had a backstory. Whether it was a politician saying something utterly stupid, people losing their minds over a show, or a country breaking up with the entire EU. The Hungerithm turned the price of a candy bar into something people actually wanted to follow. Even Reddit liked it, and they hate everything. By changing its price over 5,000 times in 5 weeks, one of Australia's largest chocolate brands created a massive social media and PR spike. But one stat mattered most, a 67% sales increase. And for the first time, You're Not You When You're Hungry was linked to real-world mood, in real-world sales. Snickers Hunger Rhythm. The angrier the internet, the cheaper the Snickers.
Yeah, it probably sounds really painful to roll out and with their retailers, but they did. They made it happen, and again, it comes with the commitment of both the agency and the clients. And I think this is one point that I really need to reinforce, and I personally, being in an agency, I feel we're all guilty of this. We just don't use data enough to drive through the funnel. We're always stopping short at awareness. We just want to do the sexy thing, and then we just don't want to think about whether people, you just assume somebody who, if your campaign awareness is high, means your sales is going to be high, sorry. I mean, with data today, you can drive right through it. I think with that said, like I said, I really want to highlight this point again. I think there's no running away from data anymore. We have to change our creative process to basically embrace it and actually do something with it. Because this is quite a recent study, it's in July 5th, and it's a study on millennials and for them to rank the top 10 brands. If you look at the top 8 here, for instance, one thing that is really similar in all of them is they're your new age brands who really use data to a point where it's setting basically the future of what marketing is. And the key thing that they also do is lots of brand here delivers a value, has a purpose, and they really leverage the information that's coming towards them and basically fine-tuning the services that they provide. So that comes to the end of my presentation. I hope that in these 5 simple steps, we could one day go from zero to hero with data. All right, thank you so much.
Shall we grab a quick seat? So we've got a few minutes now to throw a few questions at Valerie. I'm sure some of you here will have a few questions to ask. So if you do, please do put your hand up and we'll get a mic to you. I think for me, it's interesting you talk about sort of agencies having to change. I know there'll be a few clients in the room today as well, and I guess this is going to take, you mentioned it there, a sort of mind shift around not just handing the same brief back every 3 months and expecting something new and different. How are you working with clients to start to move that needle? What are you saying to them and showing them to start to change that?
Yeah, I think the honest truth is there are clients who are ready for it and there are clients who are not. For the clients who are ready, we always come back with basically research that even our research team has come up with to challenge the brief and to say, hey, here's another approach that we can actually take. And I have to say with increasingly, there are clients with that appetite to actually disrupt the process and actually do something different. Maybe not spend their entire campaign budget on it, but they're definitely more than willing to pilot a little exercise to prove that, to slowly see whether that little pilot has proven results, and then they could actually take it and roll it out into many other markets. So I think from an agency point of view, I think the onus is really on the agency to, like I said, show the way. Yes, while the clients can be a willing partner that comes along with the journey, but it is our responsibility to lead the way. Yeah.
And I guess it strikes me, you sort of talk about sort of being responsive and sort of having that, sort of always on mentality, which, is obviously something that is coming much more prevalent in marketing. Are we going to see sort of the death of the big idea and the big sort of brand platform, or is that something that can live in tandem with this or support this?
Yeah, so, I mean, which is why the very first, in the beginning, I said, the big idea is still valid because it's a simple way of capturing attention or to make something memorable. You need something to hang on to. The problem with today's campaigns that have not evolved is after cracking the big idea, they've continued to execute it like it was media that's fit for 20 years ago. I think where it needs to change is how do you bring that big idea to life in all the opportunities you have today with mobile, with the digital platform, with digital out of home. I think that's the second half of the exercise
because the execution is as important. And the likes of, I think, Steve Jobs, I remember, would say if the execution is probably more important than the idea. So I think as an industry, I think we've paid too much attention to just the beginning of the process. And then, like I said, we are happy with the fact that we've done something sexy, and then we're not thinking through the whole process anymore.
And our agencies generally, as we know them today, equipped for that. I mean, we're certainly, speaking about some markets, we're seeing the big sort of consultancies coming in, PwC and Accenture and people like that who, are management consultancies and doing more sort of end-to-end stuff with clients. Yeah. Are agencies sort of fit to compete as they are at the moment?
I honestly feel that I always believe that everyone has their own expertise, and every skill set requires a long period of time to get really good at. Which is why I still feel like as much as the consultancies are trying to get in, and they can do some part of it really well, like probably the execution, from tapping on data, knowing how to work the media. But again, advertising creatives or advertising agency folks hone their skills for 20, 30 years to learn the art of cracking big ideas. Similarly, like I said, I don't expect somebody from a consultancy to be able to catch up with that amount of experience so quickly in such a short time. So I think both parties need to come together to work together, and both bring a very unique skill set. Likewise, I wouldn't say that I could become a consultant tomorrow. And I would pull a consultancy in if I need to. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, it's time for you lot to earn your lunch that you've just had and see if you're paying attention out there. We've got a couple of questions from the floor. Don't be shy. We've got one down the front here. If you just wait, there should be a microphone literally winging its way to you as we speak.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for the talk. It's very informative. I can clearly see that you're a big proponent of data. And when I think of data, one of the first things that comes to mind is privacy. I think this week an article came out where it pretty much states that Facebook Messenger is picking up all the sounds that you make and is using it for advertising. If that's true or not, it's not the case right now, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts using your methodology, how you avoid becoming an obsessive stalker on the first date instead of being that informative, nice first date. So what are your thoughts about privacy and data and usage in advertising?
See, I think to create this kind of work, you don't have to be eavesdropping on people, right? It's just learning you better. I mean, from the interests, the things that you like, that are obvious even on Facebook itself. You can actually just simply tap on that and immediately make your creative a lot more relevant and a lot more engaging. To your, I don't know about the articles about Messenger and how true it is and all that, but all I can say is, if advertising was done in such a way where it taps on your knowing you better and giving you more highly relevant, ads, for instance, like, I mean, I personally find that a lot of ads these days that I see are far more useful than 5, 10 years ago. And is that a good thing? Yes, right? So I think there is pros and cons to it, but it's about the extreme of how far you need to go. And I don't think you need to go to that level of creepiness to really get good work out.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, would you say that we're getting better as an industry at respecting boundaries a little more than maybe we were a couple of years ago?
I think a couple of years ago, we don't even have that capability.
but being followed around the internet for days on end by the same ad for the same pair of sneakers, for example, that you'd already bought 3 days ago, or you'd gone into a store.
No, exactly to that point, right? I mean, at least I enjoy and I find ads so much more useful these days than 5, 10 years ago, where you are just being wallpapered by the same message.
Yeah. Is there anything that springs to mind that you've seen recently that you've been surprised at the fact that you did find that ad useful, or it was a product that you didn't realize you needed?
Every time, like when I was planning my Japan trip, and the next thing I come into Facebook, all my ads were about Japan. Like, fine, great, click on the editorial and read. Like, that's how I find great things to do. Like, and then after my trip, when I come back, I was searching for a sofa. And the next thing is everything in my Instagram and Facebook feed were all about furniture shops that I never knew existed in Singapore. Is that a bad thing? No, it's a good thing. It helped me got my sofa. So, yeah.
We've got another question down the front here, if you just wait for the mic to get to you.
Okay, so there's a lot of talk these days about fake media and real media, right? So, and we know social media is a place where people project not the real self, but the ideal self of what you want people to see. So how do you use those data in a way that understand deeply enough that this is real data and not fake data?
The truth is, the real data outweighs the fake data. So when you do a data mine, you're looking at aggregation, right? That percentage of fake data is not going to really disturb the real result that you're actually looking for, which is an aggregation of, 2.1 billion users. So I think, yeah, it's not, and this is the thing, like, even as planners, even when you do focus group or when you're looking at data, you don't zero in on one or two person's comments, right? Because it's not representative of the universe and or of the target audience. So yeah, I don't think really our research will be so swayed by fake information because it's just a small percentage.
Just one more question to add on to it. So as we know, Asia, it's growing very, very fast. So there's a huge growing population in large part of Asia, and there's a lot of emerging population that don't use social media, right? So how do we therefore use data for the new advertising age for this growing population?
I'm not so sure where that question is coming from in terms of why do you feel that they are not on social media? Because the numbers are showing otherwise.
My 80-year-old mom is not using social media.
So
for sure.
your 18-year-old?
My 80-year-old mom is definitely not using social media.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
she
for
still
sure.
buy lots of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So what I meant is there is a huge growing silver generation in very developed countries like Singapore, Hong Kong,
Yes.
Taiwan, for example, who is still a huge portion of the population. So how do we look at population who are still dominant in Japan as well, right? Who are still a dominant consumer group that don't really use data that we use in social media.
But then like every brief that you get in an advertising agency always starts with who the target audience is. I mean, if the target audience is 80 and above, then you will go to the media channels that they go to more often, and that's where the data sits. Maybe it's in your cable TV. So yeah, it's not so much of whether is it social data or is it data from mobile or is it data from a WhatsApp or even a WeChat. It all depends on, data can come from anywhere. And even for the silver hat, I'm sure there are data captured somewhere.
Got another question from the floor there, guys. Don't be shy. A couple minutes left. A couple over in this corner here.
Hi. Going back to the big ideas versus small ideas discussion you were having, what I'm wondering is, so the couple of examples we saw up here, whether it was Nike or Snickers, right? The executions were still sitting within a big idea. So for example, the Snickers one is still about, if you're hungry, that's when you go for a Snickers, right? What I'm wondering is, as a marketer in this day and age, how tolerant should we be about small ideas being different from the big idea, or kind of sitting outside what that big idea's ethos is overall, you know?
Yeah. See, you can definitely win and win faster by implementing small things. But even for the integrity of the brand, what you don't want to end up is 12 small things that all look very different across a year. And then if you ask somebody what does your brand stand for at the end of the year, no one could remember you for anything. So at at the heart of everything that we do, a brand is still important. And it's basically the house that makes sure that everything is in the right place. Which is why, that the big idea is still important, because it's a simple way of letting people remember Dove for real beauty. There's something people can reference any point in time of that year, versus 12 different campaigns if Dove did and had nothing to hang on to. What am I going to share with somebody? I mean, if somebody asked me what does Dove stand for, I would not have anything to say. So the brand is still integral in everything that we execute, but we can execute a lot faster and in a lot smaller ways under the umbrella.
We had another question down here, just in front there. Yep.
So obviously it makes a big headline for people to come out and say the agency model is dead, the creative agency model is dead. And just following on from your comments about creatives are quite set in their ways and the way they work together, I was wondering if, following from your experience at Facebook and now returning to a creative agency, has that experience reinforced that sentiment somewhat or changed your view of the way things work today?
I have to say for sure, my experience in Facebook was quite life-changing. And it comes down to really the culture of a place. And I have to say, admittedly, I mean, that's partly the reason why I went back to agency, because I believe that there's no reason why an agency cannot evolve and adopt that kind of openness and that willingness to disrupt and change and lose themselves and start all over again. And it is that's holding the agency back, because everyone is too afraid to let go of what they knew before. Either that, or it's just pure laziness of wanting to keep learning, which is the huge difference in Facebook. Every day they are learning something, despite the fact that they are like how many $billion company, Zuckerberg still says that they're 1% done. When is the agency ever says that they're 1% done? The agency is always happy to say we're 100% done, and now can we sit back and party, right? So I think that complacency and that close-mindedness is very ironic for agencies that are supposed to stand for creativity and newness and innovation.
Okay, we had another question, lady here, I saw first, and then we'll come to you. So we've got a couple of moments, so if we make them quick questions, please. Just wait for the mic to get to you. There we are, it's right there.
Hi, Val. Thank you so much for simplifying such a tormenting, complex topic like the way you started. And I totally, I think, relate to that. My question is, this whole, right through your presentation, you very rightfully had that whole client-agency partnership to make a success of how data gets used. So my question is, who really owns the data? There are complex ecosystems today, or there is just one agency, client, etc. Who really owns it? Who's the custodian of this data, and therefore who can drive it? Is it the client? Is it the various stakeholders? Or is it the main agency?
And it comes down to how much ownership and how much effort people want. Once ownership of data also means that you have to mine it, you have to clean it up, you have to, So it all depends on the extent of the, either parties, whether it could be an agency who's scoped to do that, to take care of it. I mean, I used to work for Leo Burnett where we were handling the SK2 business. Right. That's huge data behind it. But there's also a huge team, taking care of that data and making sure that people, users of SK2 are constantly engaged and given new content and converting and given promotions. There's so much you need to do if you own data and if you want to own it a long time like that, because it's a commitment. Versus if you look at the other examples that say what Sneaker did, right. They don't need to own that data. They're just reading data to get a bit of insights and to have some fun. So it all depends on the appetite of the client and also the nature of the business. Does it require, like a sneakers would probably not require heavy data to be owned, right. but versus an infant care formula and, say Shell, who's really successful in their rewards program. I mean, these are companies that it would make total sense to have a bit more investment and a bigger team behind the data.
Okay, gentleman there had his hand up. That'll be the last question.
Hi.
Hi, Tom.
I was taken by the list at the end. 8 of the top 10 brands for which young people have affinity are born as ecosystems. This is getting a little bit to the lady's question. What can clients do for traditional companies, that are not born as data companies, to enable hyper-personalization? So what do they need to do as an organization to get the data in a condition that it can be utilized to build relationships and create deeper intimacy?
See, during my presentation, like I said, I definitely don't have the formula right now, but you have the partners in place. So, I mean, for a long time working with big brands and everyone struggling with the integrated agency formula, no one could get it to work properly till today still. And now with more possible agencies involved, I'm working on a brand that has 9 agencies as an integrated model. Everyone's trying to figure that out, but the knowledge is there, the expertise are there. I think the clients need to really take a step back and actually think about, when you bring all these expertise together, how do you actually work them so that it's to your advantage? And I have to say, it's not perfect yet, and we're all still trying to collaborate and do the right thing.
Fantastic. I'm afraid I've got the flashing red light of doom on the clock here, so I'm going to have to draw a line under it there. Before I ask you to thank Valerie for those fantastic insights, just a quick bit of housekeeping. So in this room, next session coming up in about 15 minutes is local versus regional. How can brands spend their marketing dollars efficiently and effectively? Might dovetail quite nicely in with what we've just been talking about there. And also, obviously, don't forget to refer to your program and the app for what else is coming up in the other rooms there. But in the meantime, can you please join me in thanking our speaker, Valerie Madden?
Thank you.